You're listening to Inside IASB, a podcast series dedicated to informing and encouraging Illinois School Board members. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Isaac Warren. I'm the Director of Digital Communications at the Illinois Association of School Boards. And with me today, I have Kimberly Small, who is the Executive Director of IASB, and we're going to be talking about her experience in her first year of leadership at the association. So thank you for coming on the podcast, Kimberly.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Isaac.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to get to pick your mind about how the last year has looked, because it's just been a lot happening the last 365 days. So I'm really stoked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm excited too.
Sweet. So let's get started. So when you first assumed the position of executive director, what were your initial objectives and how have they transformed over the past year?
Sure. I first want to share with you a little bit about my why and why I work at IASB and why I have a passion for public education.
Great.
So first of all, I've shared in some of my statements when the association hired me into this role that I'm passionate about public education. I have a personal story related to that, that I won't go into detail with today, but I am really passionate about students receiving a quality public education so that they can make great decisions for themselves, for their families, and ultimately for their communities as they grow into adults and potentially even run for the school board and serve as a school board member. And the reason why I have that how that emerged is that I just have really enjoyed working with kids my entire life, from babysitting to lifeguarding, teaching swimming lessons. But when I was about 10 years old, and you've heard me tell this story to the staff, I experienced what would be called a home invasion, where my brother and I were home alone. And we weren't hurt and everything worked out. But what led to me learning about law was going to court that entire summer to be a witness in 3 different court cases. When the individuals who broke and entered into our home were prosecuted. So that led to me having a great interest in the law at an early age, somewhere between 4th and 5th grade. And then as I went to college, I had an interest in public education, but also in law. So I came out with an English degree to help me in law school and secondary education degree as well to help me teach. So I taught 7th grade, and I was a substitute teacher for PE too, having been a lifeguard. But then I took that into law school and I learned about school law, and I also had a passion about just being a public defender. And so that led me into juvenile courts and supervising in the juvenile courts and working with kiddos who had some big challenges in their lives, sometimes not of their own doing, sometimes of their own doing, but that whole thing about making great choices and learning about the impact of your choices, and education really impacts that. And so from there, I ended up here at IASB, and now I'm sitting here in this podcast with you today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's my why I'm here and how I got here. But to get to the objectives that I had in your initial question, and how they've transformed, I think initially I was focused on myself and making sure I was healthy. Made sure everybody goes to the doctor every year, but I had a couple extra doctor appointments to make sure I'm healthy enough to do this job. It takes a lot of energy. Talking with my family and my close friends to make sure that I have that support network, because the work is sometimes never ending, it feels like, but I know, you have to learn how to make those pauses, but making sure that I have that support network and they know how my patterns are going to change, even right down to my little dogs that I have.
Yes.
I'm not in the same pattern that I was a year ago. So personally, I needed to make sure that those things were set. And then I looked professionally. I had about 4 objectives with the association. First, I wanted to tell you all who I am and what I valued. Yeah. You remember that conversation back in May of 2023. So I did a lot of work with Northwestern University on leading not-for-profit organizations. And my leadership statement is impact with integrity, listening with compassion, and inspiring measurable results. And I came to that through talking with a lot of different people who've worked with me and that I trust, to just talk through, how do you see me and where do you see my strengths are at?
Sure.
A lot of people say I'm a really great listener. So that's where my leadership statement came from. But then I have these 5 leadership values: gratitude, open-mindedness, candidness, impartiality, and fairness. And I really do use my leadership statement and my values to make decisions. When I have hard ones to make, I lean back on those to make sure that I'm thinking through all facets of whatever the final decision will be. So that was one thing I needed to make sure that staff knew and understood, and the board of directors as well. You ready for my second one?
Oh yeah, go for it.
The second one is I had a plan for my first 100 days, and that involved talking to all the full-time staff, the members of the board of directors, and our partner organizations, our sister I organizations is what we call them. And I just wanted to sit down and talk with them. How do they see IASB, and what could we do to grow? And what should we not change? Because there are things that we do really well that we really shouldn't change. Yeah. So talking with everybody in that first 100 days, getting around the state to the members of the board of directors to find out what they felt was going well and where we could grow. That was the second thing that was on my plate. The third objective, are you ready?
Yeah.
Was focusing staff toward our mission and our vision. So you've seen me talk to staff about the focus on our vision and mission. And I use that camera lens in my visuals for that. Yeah. So just moving back and looking at that before we do our work and remembering why we're here to serve our members. And then last was just preparing the leadership team to focus on member engagement. That's a really important strategic priority of our organization. And I worked this year with the IASB admin team or leadership team to think through what can we do better related to engagement. So those are my objectives. And it's been a long first year and an exciting first year. I'd say for how things transformed, I really lean back on my values and my leadership statement. I want that to remain consistent so that staff and the board know what they're getting every day. So things stay consistent. So I think the transformation was just taking those and implementing them. They haven't really changed, but making them come alive and showing staff that they can trust that these stay consistent. So I can't lead people by myself. I need the leadership team, and I need everybody, including you, to help serve the members. And that's really important to remember and thank people. So you've heard us talk about gratitude a lot this year, being thankful first that we have staff to be able to serve the members, and then being thankful we have members. I'm thankful for all of our members, and I'm thankful that they run for the school board and serve their local communities.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's been great. And I remember being in those early meetings when you first started and having those one-on-one conversations, just getting to know each other. It was really, really great. Because I mean, we've worked together when you were working in the policy department, but being the executive director role, very different. But it still was really nice to get to know have that personal level. Because I think that's really helped our association kind of grow closer together and understand one another a lot better. So I really do appreciate that part of the process of your onboarding too.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So during your first year, were there any unexpected challenges that you encountered? And if there were, how did you navigate those?
Yeah. So, any new leader, when you hit the highest level in an organization, it's funny, I feel, and I don't want it to come across as arrogant, but I feel like I didn't have unexpected challenges. I had a unique advantage and position having been here for, at the time, it was 17 and a half years. Gosh, now I'm 18 and a half years in. But I had the advantage to be able to see around the corners, and having been general counsel, I had a very deep and unique understanding of what was going on across many, if not all, departments in IASB. So I would say challenges, I felt confident to see what was coming or be prepared for that. Now, I can't be prepared, for everything. Sure. We had a pandemic in 2020, and I think we knew, a pandemic might be possible, but, we couldn't have predicted how that ran. So you do need to be prepared for things that are unexpected. But I think when I looked back in the journal and my talk with Teresa Gagan last year, I talked about how we have a lot of transition in staff. That's a challenge because it costs money to transition staff and onboard staff. But we have some organic transitions related to retirements, which are really exciting and great. And then we have other people who feel like there's another place that can help them grow more for what they're looking for in their career. And that's a real big shift from where we were even 8 to 10 years ago, where we had people staying for 20, 30, 40, sometimes 48 years. I believe we had somebody retire with almost 50 years of service. So I think that the challenges that I expected were just the transition in staff, and that continued to happen throughout the year.
For sure.
I think the last thing I want to say is that there's always going to be those unexpected challenges, but I think when those happen, the thing to do is to just lean on the leadership team and the expertise of the people that I have around me to help me make those calls and be prepared for whatever comes.
Yeah. And you mentioning that shift in the retention of staff is really interesting too, because it kind of shows how nimble you have to be as a leader, because there's a quote unquote established or status quo. It's kind of like been the vibe at IASB for however many years. And then suddenly it's like, whoa, this isn't quite the same anymore. We just have to adapt and move on. It's like, how does that work? That's a bit of uncharted territory, It is. It really is. And for me, having been here as long as I have, that was I don't know if mantra is the correct word, but just, everybody is always going to stay here at IASB. And it's a great place to work. And we do have a lot of people, including myself, who've been here a really long time, but that average tenure is shrinking for sure. And I just want to assure the members that we see that happening, but we're still prepared to serve the members. And sometimes with that shift, you get innovation, right? Oh, yes, absolutely.
And new ideas, which are, of course, necessary for our organization to move forward. Yeah,
totally agree. Could you share a specific moment or decision that significantly influenced your leadership style during the past year?
Sure. I'm going to go personal on this.
Okay.
My godfather, who I just loved so much, he died on September 12th. And that I had always talked with my husband that, my godparents, my godmother is still living. They're so special to me. It'd be hard. That day would be hard. And it was really difficult. Yeah. My mom called me early in September to say time is near. And it was a situation where I just wasn't going to be able to go visit. There wasn't space to do that due to what was going on with him. But that was just difficult for me and excruciating for me to focus. And I was only about 3 months into the job. Yeah. So when you're new to a position, you want to do a good job, right? And I think what impacted me and what I learned, even though I was honest with the leadership team and the staff that this had happened, was that I needed and should have taken some time to just process that. Yeah. I went to Minnesota, I went to the funeral, and I spent time with family, but I should have taken some time on either end for myself to just process that. And I've done that since, but at the time I had being new here and that happening. And I learned from that, and I will not do that again. I'll make sure I carve that space when I have a loss that's significant.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing that influenced my leadership style. And, like I said, when heartbreak happens, because it will happen again in my life and everyone else's, just being that example to others that it's okay to stop and take a pause and process. So I shared too that my leadership purpose statement and my leadership values, I use those too to make decisions. So those influence my decisions. And I worked really hard to develop those. Again, I said that earlier, just to make sure that people know what they get. So I can provide that steadiness to the leadership team and the staff. But that doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm the furthest thing from it. So I work to remain steady and make those steady decisions for the staff and for the membership. But as we emerge from the pandemic, because we're still emerging from the pandemic, there are still a lot of different effects that we're dealing with. I have a dual focus. I want to keep our staff engaged, and I want them to be resourced so they can effectively serve the members. But then I also want to move outward and focus on engaging our members as well on our mission and our vision, because we want our members to feel confident and we want them to feel competent in making decisions at that local level in governing their school districts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that personal story. I mean, I know that sounds like it's very impactful, and it really shows another example of your leadership, in my opinion, where you have that good work-life balance. And when you have something like that happen unexpectedly, it's just kind of like that you're at a real fork in a crossroads there, because it's like, how do you balance work-life in that situation, especially so early in your tenure as executive director? But I think showing that it's okay to take that time for yourself can show not just IASB staff that they can do the same, but also the members. Like, we're making sure we're taking care of ourselves to better serve our members, but also school board members need to have that flexibility as well. Like, if you need to take time off, it all comes cascading down, I think, from the top down. So having that at the core of leadership is very important for the rest of the association, the rest of the membership, to kind of like follow by example, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that story and how it might impact you as a staff member and even our members, because we do have to take care of ourselves. We do. I just talked about taking care of my health. That was one of my objectives when I started. Yes,
so,
it's physical and mental health I got to take care of. Absolutely. So, and we kind of alluded to this in a previous question. When you faced organizational changes and shifts in strategy in your first year, how did you approach those changes and what lessons did you learn?
Sure. So how I approached them was making it okay to not be okay with the shifts. And since you're a staff member and you've heard me in some of our meetings and in our monthly meetings, I talked about a story with my kids, Jonah and Janae, about 10 years ago when I moved from Naperville to Downers Grove. My son was really not happy about this move. His reaction was just, how could you do this to me? Very upset, did not like it. And our daughter giggled when she learned about it. And she was all for it, especially because we ended up getting a dog. And so, and that helped my son too. But I use that story just to illustrate that spectrum of change. Some people are really all for it and some people are not. And there are a lot of people in between, and that can change too. So I used the fact that it's okay to not be okay with the shift or be tentative about it. We're all in a different space with that. And that's A-okay. But at the end of the day, we're still going to move forward with the shift. And another thing that I think on that spectrum with change, there's just an element of grief. So recognizing it's okay to not be okay. Everybody has a different thought process on how their job goes, how their department operates within the context of the organization. And so we have to recognize everybody's in a different spot. I might have been thinking about this for a year, but Isaac may have just heard about this a week ago and it's very new. It's very new to someone else. And so recognizing that is really important when you're talking about organizational changes. Another thing that I've talked to some of the members about is this book, The Age of Overwhelm by Laura van der Noot Lipsky. I'm glad you brought this here into our studio today.
Yeah.
It will be at the joint annual conference, and I've shared it with some of our board presidents because in the book, it talks about the fact that the root of all misery is attachment. And that gave me pause when I read that for several reasons. During my first year here at IASB, you knew I had to move.
Yeah.
And it was exciting for my family, but also I was attached to my house up in Downers Grove. I loved living there. And so I thought to myself, wow, if I keep this house, because my initial plan was to keep that house and go back and forth, I thought this is just going to be miserable. So that book gave me pause in my personal life about being attached to a house, which I think is common. People love their homes but it also transfers to your work and anything else in life. You get attached to things and sometimes they need to evolve, and that's hard. And there's an element of grief to that. So I tried with the staff and the board as well, and our members, as some of these changes start to hit them, understand that change brings an element of grief. Sometimes it's excitement, but everybody's at a different place with it.
Sure.
And the last thing I'd like to say about that change is just communicating to those who are impacted first. That's been a change too this year, where if a department or a staff member is going to be impacted by any type of shift, I've worked with the leadership team to talk about it first at the epicenter, and then we move out toward the organization, and then to the board of directors, and then the membership, because the people who are impacted first or the most, I feel, need to have time to process that before we hit the gas and move forward.
It's a lot easier to listen to the feedback too. And what you've been talking about reminds me of our core values of making sure every voice is heard. And this process of dealing with communicating these changes and listening to the feedback, I think, is really good, because it allows those voices to happen and that feedback to occur in an environment that's not clouded by everyone else. Instead of shooting out an email, here's the change, that's just how it's going to be. It's a very back and forth, like, here's how this is going to work. This is how it will affect your workflow and everything. Because like you're talking about attachment, like physical things like a home, people get attached to workflows. That's how I've done it for 10, 20, 30 years. Right. If something's going to change, like, whoa, that's huge. That's essentially changing their day-to-day operations. And then I'm probably going to be willing to, like, all right, I'll throw it by the wayside. So I recognizing that the attachment is very much real, and to tangible, non-tangible things is really important too, especially in the workplace. Absolutely. And I feel strongly that when the employees are taken care of and they can have time to process and even, dare I go as far as say, grieve a change, but essentially process how this is going to impact my day-to-day work, they are more equipped than to serve the member and be all in when a member calls and needs support, because they'll be engaged, and that helps bring our members in and stay engaged as well. We will continue this discussion in part 2. In the meantime, feel free to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or your podcast player of choice. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And thank you for your dedicated volunteer service to public education. If you'd like to stay up to date with future episodes, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube Music. Have a comment or question? We welcome listener feedback and invite you to leave us a voicemail via the link in the description, or send us a voicemail at communications@iasb.com. Thanks.